everyone. Thanks for coming for this new talk of the LeaderSHE cycle. As you know, LeaderSHE is a series of talks that we have, and we bring leaders in their respective professional fields to inspire us on how to reach leadership in our professional life. So this cycle of seminars is promoted by the Equal Opportunities Committee of the Institute. And today we have the pleasure of having with us Mar Reguant, and she is an energy economist, and I'm going to make a brief summary of her CV. So she's a researcher at the Institute of Economic Analysis and a part-time professor at Northwestern University, and she's specialized on energy economics and industrial organization with a focus on the energy transition. So Mark obtained her PhD at MIT, and she's worked at Stanford Graduate School of Business and Toulouse School of Economics. So she has received several prestigious grants and awards for her work on energy markets, including the Sloan Research Fellowship, the Savary Prize for Economic Research, the EAERE Award for Researchers in Environmental Economics under the age of 40, and the Presidential Early Career Award in Science and Engineering. So in 2020, she was awarded an ERC Consolidator grant to work on understanding the energy transition with a machine learning toolbox. And she was appointed to the French government's Commission of Experts on the Great Economic Challenges, where she was co-leader of the team focused on climate change. And at present, she is also consultant for different agencies of the Generalitat de Catalunya. So Mar is going to talk today about challenges and successes as a female energy economist. So the floor is yours, and thank you.
Oops. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for this invitation. I'm very excited to be here on this kind of weird talk that I've never given before. I'm excited to share with you my experience as a researcher and as a female researcher. And I hope that you'll find it insightful or at least amusing. So before starting, I wanted to make a disclaimer about me as a leader and the fact that I am subject to survivor bias. So I will be telling you some anecdotes about how me as a female economist have faced some challenges. Some of them are not nice, but I'm lucky enough that I have not been physically harmed in any way. And that's important because if I had, I would probably have not managed to be a leader today, and I would not be standing here in front of you. So this is just a moment to stop and think that as a leader, I have suffered some difficulties, but probably those that don't make it are the ones that suffer the most of them. So with this said, I hope you enjoy my anecdotes that are not so fun, some of them, but some of them are almost hilarious. So what is it being a woman economist in the world? This is the G20 summit of finance ministers. I see many suits and a couple women. So this is, in general, how economists are portrayed in the world, not just as an illusion, a man in a suit, but also in practice, in many, many settings. That's what I see every time. Oftentimes I'm at a conference and everyone's a guy except for me. And sometimes I tell them, like, guys, next time don't even invite me, okay? You can just have your own thing and don't make me come here. So it is quite common that I am maybe one of two women in a room, maybe one of three. That feels like critical mass. So that's what being a woman in a world of economists. What about the university? So unfortunately, economics is one of the fields that is lagging behind in terms of representation. By the way, Spain is a bit of an exception. I want to say that probably as an economist undergraduate in Spain, women were kind of 50-50 maybe, but it's a bit of an exception. So your Spanish perception will be quite not representative of the rest of the world. In the United States, there's been a lot of research to understand this, and you can see here the evolution of female representation in different fields. And what you can see is that in economics, it's about 30% of women that are in undergraduate programs. But maybe the most shocking fact is that this 30% has remained the same over many, many years. You can see STEM, the science fields that are often also more like for the guys or whatever they want to say. In the US, STEM fields are now overrepresented, not overrepresented, but more or less 50-50, 55% of the undergraduates in STEM are women. And yet in economics, it's a very kind of bro-like community. As I said, this is not true in Spain, but it's true in almost any other country where women are barely represented. 30% seems very minor representation. And as economists, we like to argue that this lack of representation can lead to lack of diversity of opinions. At the end of the day, economics is not physics or chemistry. It's a pretty subjective science where we have opinions on how the world should work. And having too many guys in that picture, I'm not sure I like it. And this already comes from the undergraduate in many countries. PhD programs are no better. This is a picture from a recent survey. And you can see that in some departments, so here what you can see is how many graduate students are female from 1994 to 2012, and then a slightly later cohort. And what you can see is that basically how many of them graduate. And you can see that in many PhD programs in the United States, the share of women is well below 50%. In many, it's 20 to 30%. The paper also suggested that the best programs are the ones that are closer to 20% and 10% even. And the programs that are not as good start to have some female representation. So it's not only that the average looks bad, it's also in the best programs, there are barely any women. At Northwestern, where I am at, I think we might be either the outlier there at the 0.12 or point something, so very low, or the 20% there. I cannot remember if we were number 1 or number 2. You want to be number 1 and number 2, but maybe not in this chart, you know? So that's kind of how I've lived my life as a PhD economist in the US. We often make the news for the wrong reasons. So on the left, you can see these researchers hate speech. This was a recent paper that was widely publicized this summer, in which some researchers used some fancy computer science tools to identify anonymous posters in a Reddit like for economists. It's basically a website where people will trash others anonymously. I've made it to that website once, but someone pointed out that you cannot spell smart without saying mar, and that shut it down. So I came out pretty good on that Reddit forum. There were some people defending me, but for some other women, it goes into pages and pages of basically criticizing them, making fun of them for their appearance, for their opinions, for anything else. So it's infamous, and it has made the life of many women very hard. So these researchers identified the anonymous posters, not quite their names, although some people believe they can do it, but they haven't gone as far as identifying their names, but their universities. And shocker, the top universities like Harvard, Stanford, the University of Chicago, all of them are contributing to that website. So their typical excuse is that this was some low-level universities of people that didn't have anything to do. But in reality, it's been shown that it's really top researchers that are contributing to this hate speech. Another piece of news, we just made it to the news last week, where there was a transition at an important research center in Germany. It's called ESA. I don't know if any of you have heard about this controversy. Anyone there? Probably not. Well, this is one of the largest research institutions in Germany for labor economics, like unemployment, how to do unemployment policies. They have a lot of impact worldwide, and they have many, many members, including the recent Nobel laureate, Claudia Waldin, who does gender economics. So last week or 2 weeks ago, they announced that their new director would be somebody called Armin Fogg, who, on top of not being a labor economist, had been investigated for sexual harassment a year ago. Not only had he been investigated for sexual harassment a year ago, the person who had mentioned the sexual harassment was heavily criticized for bringing up those charges, and actually she committed suicide. So as a woman in the field of economics, you're sitting there, you wake up in the morning, and you see that the person who was involved in a case of sexual harassment, they concluded there is no proof, but this doesn't mean there wasn't anything there. It's just there is no proof or sufficient proof. The person who felt the need to voice those concerns committed suicide, and you make him the director of the biggest research center, or one of the biggest research centers of Germany. So sometimes this is what it feels to be an economist. And it does feel like that, to be honest. So I write here, this is me on Twitter that day. I say, some days I'm tired of being a woman in this profession. And I wonder why until I'm gracefully reminded. The gracefully here is doing a lot of heavy lifting. It's not very graceful. So many economists went on, thankfully, to say that this was absolutely disgusting. I hope you're disgusted in this room. And eventually he did not take office, and he will not be the new director. I'm not sure if this is a victory, because honestly, it's appalling that you would consider making such a person the director of a research center, but at least he will not be a director. So I don't know if it's a victory or not, to be honest. So this is being an economist. I think in sciences, it can be even better than in economics. So we are really like the cherry on the cake when it comes to not being great with female economists. This is me at Northwestern, and I wanted to highlight that we are a happy bunch, and I'm very happy there. So this is me in 2018, when I was there full time. But you will notice that even though I'm very happy, I'm very much alone. The other person that you can see that is also kind of small is a Spanish economist who was my advisee. So this was me, and it's still me when I go to Northwestern. It's me and a bunch of guys, and maybe a student who typically works under my supervision, because she's like, okay, maybe I can talk to Mark, you know? So I do think it's a real issue, and it's a bigger issue than in most other sciences and disciplines, I would say. We talk with my husband quite a bit about why this is the case, and I think it's precisely because it's a pretty subjective science. It's a pretty subjective science that does require some math, but you can bullshit a lot around it. And on top of that, it is linked to power. And that's why I think in economics, we're so behind. You can be subjective. You can say, oh, but he knows his stuff. He knows it very well. And then there's no way to say, oh, but that's not correct, because it's an opinion kind of thing. And it does lead to power. So anyhow, this is my introduction about being a woman in economics. Now I'll tell you a bit more about myself. This is me. Hi. So I was born in 1984 next to my twin sister. We are 3 siblings at home. My brother, who's an environmental scientist and studied here at UAB. My sister, who's an architect and an urbanist, and me, who studied economics here at UAB. We all grew up in a tiny town in Suria. It's about 6,000 people. And we were there until college. We went to public school until college, and then we went to the university. So growing up in a small town and being maybe a bit leaning in, like I was a bit pushy, I was a bit like, a bit intense. It's a bit hard. because a small town has a finite amount of people that's very small. So sometimes it was difficult, but I think it was particularly easy for me because I have my twin sister, and with her we would be kind of buddies. So when we had not too many friends, at least I would always have my twin sister that was there next to me. This might be a thing that people commonly go through, but I think in high school, you wonder sometimes if you should do things poorly on purpose to have an easier life. And I definitely consider that. But next to my twin sister, honestly, it was not that deep of a thought. I have to say I got my leg broken twice. So it was not easy, but I kind of made it and I went to college. And when I arrived here at UAB, it was kind of refreshing to see that there were other people I could talk to, where I could just be my own and not hide myself. I remember one of the first classes I was hiding my notes under the table because I had done the homework at the university. So I'm an 18-year-old, an adult, hiding my homework so that my classmates don't know that I do the homework before coming to class. Because I didn't want to get bullied again. But they did not bully me, and I had a great time at UAB. So at UAB, I would mostly say that gender was not an issue, although you will see there a bit of a kind of thing. So I had many female professors, many female classmates. I had great mentors that actually allowed me to go to MIT. The only, however, I put in there is that I did have a boyfriend that was a PhD student and dated 3 undergraduates. So in hindsight, that was not my best choice, but it was not a very long-lasting event. So that's me. When I went during undergraduate, I visited Germany, and actually that gave me an appreciation of how women are treated in Spain. So I think in Spain, there are many things that are not good about women, but at least in the university, I could see many women being represented at all ranks. I could see women full professor, I could see women assistant professors, I could see PhD students that were women. When I went to Germany, this was back in 2004, I was shocked at how pyramidal their academic system is, but also the lack of women. There were absolutely no women. Also, my classmates, what I was mentioning at the beginning, that there are about 30% undergraduate students that are female in general. In Germany, that might have been even less. So even in class, I could see that there were no classmates that were female, and definitely no professors, no assistant professors, no helpers to the assistant professor. Maybe there was a woman doing photocopies. You know, that was kind of the level of how pyramidal the structure was. I had a great time, although I did not speak German much, a little bit. So it made it very, very difficult, but I kept trying. Although I did face some, I don't know if you can call it microaggressions, in the sense that people expected me to fail very much in Germany. To be fair, I'll give them the right that I probably had many chances of failing, but more or less I kind of managed to do that year and make the classes. There was a student in the undergraduate program that was actually going to Harvard, and I admired very much because he was preparing to do a PhD and going to Harvard, and I was like, oh, I want to be like him. So at that time, I was preparing myself to go to do a PhD in the United States, and I thought like, oh, this is a role model for me. So I commented with a classmate, oh, he's my role model. Next year, I will be doing the same thing. And he kind of went like, well, Mari, you know, not everyone can go to Harvard, okay? So, not Harvard, but pretty close, next to it. I'm better, I would say. So MIT. So the year after I went to MIT, and I kept thinking about like, not everyone can go to Harvard. And I'm like, yes, I made it. But I think women, as women, we do get these comments way more than men. Like, not everyone can do this. Or why are you even trying? Oh, you shouldn't do it now. And we could keep talking, and I'm sure some of you are kind of, yes. So at MIT, I had a great time, and I have to say that gender also was not an issue, a little bit like at UAB. I could see many female, this is an exception in the United States, a big exception, but there are many female professors at MIT. They have great mentoring, and they have many women lunches, many kind of activities that are geared towards women to feel included. In my class that year at Harvard, there was one woman that entered the PhD program and dropped out. By the way, in economics, the PhD cohort is 20 people at least. So 20 to 25 people. So one woman is 1 out of 20 to 25 people. So at Harvard, there was one woman that dropped, and at MIT, we were nine women out of 22, which is kind of amazing compared to many other places. So it was a great environment. I also was lucky enough to be in an interdisciplinary group for climate change and electricity engineering with many female engineers. So my experience was that everything's good and cool with the glasses. I also was there with my partner, which Jessica knows, and it's kind of an amazing person. And one of the things that happened to me during the PhD that many of my female classmates were struggling with is that we were wondering if us doing well academically would make us not, in the US, this is a thing, not marriable. You cannot get married. So in my case, I was worried that this would distance me from my partner because in my experience, some of my previous boyfriends were not very happy when I did things well. And I started thinking, should I do things? Do you remember I told you I thought that in high school? I started thinking during my PhD, should I do poorly so that I can stick with my best partner? But he's my best partner. So he didn't mind that I'm kind of great. And that's, you know, the best partner that you need. But unfortunately, those guys are pretty hard to find. So I'm happy I found one that just takes me for what I am and appreciates my intelligence, my drive, my aim, and doesn't feel any shadow from me trying to be my best, which most guys would feel very insecure about. So find a great partner, guy or woman, but a great one. So I had, as I said, a great experience, and gender was not that big of a deal. I did go into finding many jobs, and I ended up deciding to go to Stanford because it's a place where there's a lot of active, California is a state where there's a lot of active climate policy, environmental policy going on. And I felt it would be a great place to thrive. So at Stanford, I had my big, that's me there. I was doing so well that I was like, what could go wrong? I'm doing so well. I was publishing a lot of my work. I was getting good grants. I was teaching pretty well, even though it's hard for a young female to teach MBA students. MBA students have many qualities, but they can be a bit, you know, bro to the power of bro. So it's intense, but I did pretty well, I would say. But somehow it's the time when I realized that in the eyes of some people, I am a woman. I just had never thought that in the eyes of some people, I'm a woman and not a person. Like, oh, they see me as a woman. Also, I always, I'm a bit of a tomboy, so I never thought of myself as a woman. So this guy is talking to me, he would be my mentor. And it was a time when I was going up for a promotion. Americans love their guns and their promotions. So a promotion in the US is kind of, oh, you got a promotion. So I was going up for a promotion and I was doing so well that I should have gotten it like in no time. What happened is that at the time I was looking to relocate with my husband because we had the so-called two-body problem. So I was kind of leaving anyway, but they had asked for letters, they had asked for advice from other people. So I told them, look, it's a promotion and you have all the input. It will help me get a better job in the next place. So I would prefer the process to go through, even if I might be leaving soon. I asked them, can we do the process anyway, given that there was 1 week left for the process to finish. So after a month later, I'm like, oh, they haven't told me anything. I am talking with the other employer to see what my job could be. I was trying to get an associate professor job instead of assistant professor job, but I was waiting for the promotion. And I went to talk to them and they're like, oh, you know what? We just canceled it because you look too good. And if we don't want to give you this promotion in front of the others because you will make the others look less good. So you look too good and you're leaving anyway. So why do you need the promotion? And they're like, okay. So when I get upset, sometimes I get very upset. So I was very upset, and I'm like, why would you do that? And I kept thinking, there's no way on earth that they would have done that to a guy, and even less that they would have done that to a guy that has the wife working at home, you know, like staying at home. So I got very pissed, and I went talk to them, and I'm like, look, I know I'm leaving, but this is so unfair, whatever. And in the same conversation, the guy is like, Mark, don't worry. You have so much potential. You have the potential of being like, and he said the name of a very important person in our field. It's too bad that you are a woman. And I'm like, excuse me. And he was like, well, it's too bad that you are a woman and one day you will have children. And then instead of being a good researcher, you will want to be a good mom. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I went back to my office. And it took a while to process that because, again, I never thought that people perceived me as a woman. But nonetheless, that people were just punishing me for being a woman for no good reason. I did not have children at the time. I do have them now. But at that moment, I was thinking, should I have children? What will people think if I have children? Obviously, those are crazy thoughts. You should do with your life whatever you want. But if you take a young researcher that's doing their best, working all day, and you tell them these things, the normal thing is that they'll be like, what am I doing here? Why am I even trying if they will always perceive me as a woman? That's almost a man, almost. So when I was at Northwestern, I had the best of the environments, but I have to confess that I was a bit down because I always thought, oh, I became a bit suspicious. So what are they thinking about me? Are they appreciating me for what I am? Or are they just thinking I'm no good? I also had 2 children, so I was very stressed about having children and them thinking that I'm just a good mom. I'm not sure I am. I try. So it was a bit hard, even though I do think my colleagues were very supportive. I still struggled a little bit with being a woman with the students. So you saw the picture at Northwestern, it's many, many guys. And sometimes I have a hard time getting the students, the male students, to respect me in ways that I don't think my male colleagues are struggling with. So I will give them advice on what to do for next week. And they will come back a year and a half later and do it. Because last week, John told me. And I'm like, oh, okay, I told you last week plus a year and a half, but thank you for doing this, even that John told you. So I've had some trouble with advising male students, and sometimes I end up advising more female students, in part because we have things in common, but also in part because I feel they listen to me a little bit more. I had one of my junior colleagues tell me, Mara, I cannot believe how the guy student replied to you. Like, they just don't care what you're saying. They don't listen to you. So at least I got some confirmation that it's not just me imagining it. At some point, you start wondering, is it me that I'm imagining it? Or is it truly the case that they just don't listen to me? And unfortunately, I do get some confirmation from others that they don't seem to listen too much. It's not all of them, obviously, so I'm not putting all the guys in one basket. But on average, I have a hard time sometimes with the students that are guys. And sometimes I even come up with things that I do in front of them so that they can see that I can do anything I want better than them, so that they start respecting me a little bit. And it's kind of sad that you have to do a bit of a somersault and a triple mortal in front of them so that they'll respect you. So one day we were brainstorming about a project, and I told them some comment, and both of them look at me startled. And I'm like, Mar, this is an actually insightful comment. And I'm like, well, I make them all the time. So it's just struggling. I struggle sometimes with how people perceive me as a woman, given that I don't think of myself as a woman. I think of myself as a person that's trying to do her best work every day. So this is me trying. to overcome some of those challenges. So since 2021, I have this consolidated organ. By the way, did you notice it ended in 2020 and we started in 2021? Those of you with small kids, you all know where 2021 went, to the trash can, okay? So here it's me with my ERC consolidated organ trying. And coming back at home has been good, but it has been a bit challenging. Sometimes I wonder, is it because I'm a woman or is it just because, okay? And sometimes I don't know. I ask my husband, what do you think? And he was like, that means it's because I'm a woman. Sometimes he was like, no, don't worry. I'm like, okay, maybe it's not because I'm a woman. So it makes you a bit suspicious. So when I came back, I tried to go to UPF, which for economics, it's considered a very good university in Europe. And people know it in the US as a good reference. So I was thinking about going to UPF. And they made me a job offer and I was planning on going. But then when I told them, okay, yes, I'll come, they are like, oh, wait a minute. Someone in the department thinks you have too good of a job offer. So we're changing it. And I'm like, wow. So they are upset at my job and now you're gonna change it. So I decided this was not a good place for me, even if that's objectively the place that would have been better objectively. But for the girls in the room, you know, if one day they are trying to take advantage of you, just if you can, walk away. That's what I did because I could, because I have already a lot of accomplishments. I really didn't need that job. So I could see some, and I'm like, okay, I'm out. Now I'm here at the UAV and I'm much happier because I feel better treated and much more appreciated. I'm at a point where I don't need to take some bad behavior because I don't need to. Unfortunately, many women are not in that position. And many women would be in the same position as me, and they would have to take the worst job because some guy has complained about their job. And they would have to take it because maybe they don't have anything else, or maybe because at the time being at the top department is a priority and much more important for their career. So I think with age, it comes, with age, you have the advantage of doing whatever you want. Yes, at least that's what I'm trying to do. That now I'm a bit more careful. And if I see some things that I'm like, I just run away. And that's not bad, I think. So I'm here very happy, as I said, with my consolidator grant. And we're doing a lot of work. This is my team that I wanted to show to you. So my current team, it's me and 2 postdocs and 2 research assistants. We'll have one from the Basque Country come in January, and also a visiting student from Belgium. So if you look at the pictures and the names, you can see there's a lot of female in my team, and it's in part in purpose, but in part also an equilibrium. So I make offers also to guys, but the women are much more likely to say yes and come work with me. And I think that's maybe normal. But I also do an active effort of mentoring students. For example, Charlotte is from Belgium, and I invited her to come over so that I can be proactive and mentor them in my day-to-day basis. I already told you there are not many undergraduate students, but I've mentored many undergraduate students, and some of them have gone to do PhDs at Stanford, Berkeley, Harvard, Columbia, and many other places. So I try to do my best to basically mentor female students when I can. And again, I do naturally find that they listen more to me than the guys, which is a good thing, at least for me. I'm not sure for them, but for me, for sure. So this is kind of my journey. I wanted to do some takeaways. That was me in 1984, and this is me today. Some takeaways for me on my path. So don't let others define what you can do. I think for most women, people expect less from them. And that's one of the things I hate the most, when people don't expect much from me. So take that and rebel a little bit. But I do think you need to understand that it will make your life harder. The fact that people don't expect much from you, the fact that people don't listen to you, the fact that people don't expect something insightful from you. So that can be a bit difficult. And sometimes I think you have to cut your losses and let go. So for example, in my research, I was initially working on topics that are very male dominated. It was all guys but me. And now I've gravitated to topics that maybe there are 3 girls instead of 1 in the room, because it just makes my life better. And there's nothing wrong in changing a little bit who we are to make our life better. So you can see Mari in 1984 was just a round ball, and now Mari is kind of a woman, and it's okay. If people see me that way, maybe I have to think about how to make my life a bit better. Above all, I would do what you are. I would do whatever you enjoy, and try to do it as much as you can. And yeah, and that's kind of my insights. So thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mark, for this very interesting talk. I think it's very different, your experience, like in economics, as you were mentioning, as the one we have in other scientific fields. But I understand it can be very hard seeing the pictures. And now the room is open for questions. So any questions from the audience? Yes, yes. I have a question. So thanks a lot for the talk. I really enjoyed it. And I have a question for you, and I don't know if you can answer or if you have, because a professor from the economics school told me that in the States, but in the case of economics, they like you as a professor, you can hire postdocs or researchers for your institution in a kind of market of researchers, and these meetings happen in a hotel, and it's quite weird and disgusting by my point of view. I don't know if you can explain a little bit about
No,
that.
yeah, that's totally true. So in economics, although COVID fixed it for us, so now these meetings happen on Zoom. But traditionally, you would go to a big convention with thousands and thousands of economists, and then the interviews would happen in hotel rooms. Yes. And then you would have like the committee sitting on top of a bed, and then you would go there and they would ask you questions about your research. And yeah, we thought it was normal. I can see how it looks kind of weird based on your reaction. I did go through that process because it was in 2011, and I did not find it shocking, again, because I was thought this was normal, So sometimes, we don't question things, but it's true that in hindsight, it is a bit weird. The weirdest thing that happened there is that I had so many interviews, so many. I must have seen, I don't know how many people. And after, I don't know, maybe 14 interviews, a very pregnant woman opens the door. And that was the first woman that I saw in the entire day, after seeing maybe 100 guys. And she was so pregnant that I'm thinking, poor thing, just let her be home or something, So, and then I didn't see any other woman for the rest of the day. So I think to me it was very like stark. The many men that I met, I was not too worried about the hotel thing because I understood it's how it's done, but it can lead to serious abuse, and it's not, I'm glad we are not using that method anymore. Yes, but it is true, definitely true. I've been there, so yeah.
Thank you very much, Mark, for the nice talk. I like it very much how you explain how you will build yourself a little bit in time. Indeed, you mentioned it explicitly how shapes to be mother. So I want to, if you can explain us a little bit to what extent to be mother, the maternity, it determines a little bit what you are doing or what you did or what the decisions that you took during your career. Because I do not know if you have daughters of small children, and I think that my question is they shape your decisions and the decisions of your family.
So I have a 4 and a 6-year-old. So my daughter was born when I had received tenure. So I already had a permanent position, which made my life very easy from an academic point of view. So at the time, I did not consider changing my career. I was just very stressed about them thinking I'm not working. So I did many, many crazy things that I wouldn't do now. Like I would go from airport to airport with I don't know how many liters of milk. One day I showed up at the airport with my diaper bag, but no passport, no credit cards, nothing. So, like I did crazy things. I was definitely sleep deprived. So I think I should have taken more time off. I should have done things differently. In the US, the view is that even from female economists, which I hate, some female economists will go teach a class, in the evening go drop the baby, and the next morning they show up at the office, which is, like not okay. They should take some time off even just for medical reasons. So among the female economists at the top departments, they take a lot of pride in just being there and pretending nothing has happened to you. Yeah, 5 trucks went over me, but okay, nothing has happened to me. So I did find it a bit difficult to keep catching up, and because I didn't stop, it took me forever to recover. And then when I thought I was recovering, I did a special program that's actually very good, which is called the Faculty Diversity Program, and it's a program to get back on track. And that program ended March of 2020. And then I went with my 1 and 3-year-old into COVID mode. So I was forever destroyed and damaged. So yes, I have had a hard time making it work and reconciling it. But more and more, I put them as a priority. I'm like, whatever. And coming back, a big reason was that my children can enjoy their family, their cousins, their grandparents, and I can enjoy my parents, my nephews. So I think more and more I put family first. But at the time I had them, based on my previous experiences and how I would stop being a good researcher, I projected too much from that bad experience into just trying to pretend nothing had happened to me, which it's not very accurate. So luckily, I already told you I have an amazing partner, but he will recognize that no matter how much he did, at the end, we do have much harder time with, being pregnant, having the delivery, things work, things don't work. My son couldn't have any formula, so I was breastfeeding him until 1 year old. Only breastfeeding, and he only started eating at 10 months. So it was very difficult. I was still traveling. I don't know how. I was still 8 hours in the office. I don't know how. So I think we do crazy things, and we need to just, if I can speak formally, don't give a fuck about what they think, and just do whatever works for us, because we keep projecting, and no matter how much we do that we think they want us to do, it will never be enough. For some of them, we will always be women, and then something else. So for those guys, I'm no longer trying. I'm just doing whatever works for me. But for a while I did. I was so upset that they would see me as something different, that I was just trying to pretend I wasn't. Yep.
Okay. Do you have any other questions? Margarita.
Very nice talk. So what keeps you going when you reach those points of saying, look, I've had enough? What keeps you going?
To me, my research, I just enjoy asking questions and see what answer I will have. And then mentoring a little bit, but mostly the research. I have fun getting new data sets, looking at the energy transition. I study the energy transition and electricity markets, and they are changing every single day. So you always have questions that you can ask. It's not hard to come up with the questions because they keep happening with so many changes we've seen. For example, with the energy transition is already a big deal, and then you have the energy crisis on top of the energy transition. So you can keep asking questions and it will never end. So I do just enjoy what I do. Yes. Yeah. With the mentoring, depending on the guys that I'm mentoring, sometimes I'm like, I should kick him out, like make my life better. But other than that, the rest is good. Yes. And then I choose much more where to go and why. So I no longer go to some place where I know I'll be the only one and I'll feel like whatever, have fun. So I protect myself a bit more in terms of time. Yes. Yep.
Question? Can you say louder?
A bit louder.
And I have one question: how do you balance within your life and in the role as a mother and also as a student?
So now I use the school of the kids as my schedule, and then a little bit the grandparents. So if I have some deadline, then I call my mom or something. But in general, I try to be with them when they are not at school. They do a couple extra activities so that I can get an hour extra, but I don't try to do much more than that. For example, in the US, when I was there, it would be crazy not to work during the weekend, like crazy. Like you go on Monday and you're like, oh, what did you do? I went to the beach, and everyone will be like, oh, thank you for sharing. I was at the library or something. I'm like, okay. So in the US, you don't talk about anything that would be fun. But now on weekends, I mostly don't do much. It's true that sometimes I work at night because I still work a lot with people in Chicago, and 5 p.m. is midnight here. So I still have some remnants of being a workaholic, and sometimes 9 to midnight. I work quite a bit, 9 to midnight, and that way I scrap a few more hours, 9 to midnight. So, but other than the 9 to midnight, I think I'm a pretty reasonable person. Yes. Now, not in the past. Yes.
I have a couple of questions. One of them is that you were mentioning that many times you are the only woman or two women in a room full of men. Besides feeling differently because you are in minority, do you feel that they treat you differently? I mean, I don't know, in a meeting or so is something that you feel? Or
yes, it's hard to define, but oftentimes they just don't give the same weight sometimes to what you're saying, to your opinions, yes. Or I think it's natural that you feel closer to people that look like you. So I'm not necessarily judging them, but they will just go kind of all together, or they'll go for whiskey or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know. So some of my female friends, they have learned to go for whiskey and whatever. I just don't care about whiskey, like I could be like, oh, it's such a good whatever. How do you call it in whiskey? Like, I don't even know the jargon. But some of my female friends, they'll learn all of this jargon and they'll start being like, oh, let's go for whiskey and bourbon or whatever and talk about these things. To me, I just don't put the effort anymore, but they have all these inner circles. In economics, it's quite astonishing. It also sometimes happens when we discuss candidates. So this year I have many students who are looking for a job because they are graduating now. And there is one woman and the rest are guys. And objectively, I think the woman is the best from many objective measures, like many. But then when we have a meeting to discuss how we are thinking about trying to find a job for them and helping them searching, not in hotel rooms, but in Zoom meetings. So how can we help them? All of a sudden, every guy but my student has a lot of potential. And I'm like, okay, but where's the potential with facts? Oh, but they are so smart. Such raw creativity. And I'm like, okay, but it's raw, So where are the facts? And it's very hard to argue with facts. Like they will just feel like they are better. I was once at a hiring meeting at Stanford. It was an hour meeting and we discussed many guys. Most of them, this is a bit harsh, but it's not uncommon in economics, although it should be. But they maybe had graduated 2 years, 3 years. They still had no publication, like zero. Again, in economics, it does happen. But that doesn't mean you will claim the guy is a genius, It can happen, but don't claim the guy is a genius, He has no publications. So we were in a meeting an entire hour talking about guys that had no publication, but were geniuses. 1 minute before the end of the meeting, Oh, by the way, the dean has told us that we need to discuss female candidates. And everyone goes like, so they take some CVs of amazingly accomplished women. Like, I don't know how many publications, like top heroes. They throw them at the table like this. Everyone picks them up and they are like, does any of you see something that you like? Oh no, not enough potential. And I'm like, oh, you gotta keep kidding me, you know? So it's unbelievable how you know, how subjective they become. Yep.
My other question was about this percentage that you were saying that in Spain is much better, surprisingly, than in the rest of the world. Why do you think is that? I mean,
yeah, I have no idea. I actually have many friends. The other day, someone, I forgot who, but someone was telling me, is Spain almost matriarchal? And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so, but but thank you. You know, like we are doing less badly than I thought. So I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah. It obviously also happens in Soviet countries, where female and men were much more represented. But yes, I don't know. Yes.
And what do you think should be done so that the percentages improve? I mean, I guess having more role models, no, for economists, young economists, female. But what else? Because I think, as you say, it's very subjective things that it's like installed, no, in economics.
Yeah.
How can you change that? I think it's very difficult.
So sometimes we have several mentoring programs. Some of them are targeted to undergraduates. At undergraduate, I do a lot of work mentoring students to go into PhD programs. For assistant professors, we also have a special programs where we meet together and we do one-on-one. For example, I had one of these mentoring experiences, and the student was struggling quite a bit because they kicked her out from MIT in the middle of her tenure track, which is very uncommon. And they would have not if she were a white guy. Okay, so that's my opinion, definitely an opinion. So she came home for 10 days as a retreat, you know. So we do a bit of a network of, you know, giving support to each other. Some of my colleagues are a bit discouraged. And sometimes I do think about that too, because you make a big effort to convince them that this is worth it, that this is great. But then you're throwing them into this kind of pit of lions. So some of my colleagues are like, yeah, we can do a lot of effort into having more and more female students, but if they will be treated like shit, are we doing them a service or not? For the overall picture, yes, we're doing a service to having more women in economics. For the women that we send into economics, maybe for them, they would be happier somewhere else. And this is something that we struggle a bit with. I struggle a bit with it because it's true. I'm not sure if I'm making them happier. So I know it's a bit weird maybe, but yeah, sometimes I wonder. I just had a student who went to Stanford and she was a PhD student and wasn't coming up with ideas as quickly as others. This happens all the time. But she's Chinese and she's very shy and they kicked her out, which never happens. And I'm like, what did I do to her? Like, I'm certain that this would have not happened to her if she were kind of a white guy with a bit more like, you know, more like, oh yeah, I have a great idea kind of thing. But she doesn't have that. And now I sent her there and she had the worst time ever. So sometimes I do wonder, what am I doing there? But we do try to encourage again, but the encouragement leads to more female there. Hopefully in the future it will be better. Yes. Yep.
Elena?
Thanks so much for the talk. I have a question. Do you think that without the extra effort that you made when you become a mother, without this effort, you would be now in the same position? Or in other words, do you think that we are in a moment that we can tell women that you can have kids, you can live maternity as a normal person, and this would not be detrimental for your...
So I think even since the time I went to the US, it has improved. So for example, when I went to MIT, it was extremely supportive of women, as I mentioned. But at one of those women lunches, someone asked, what do we do if we want to have a kid? And the female professors were like, excuse me, what? You're a PhD student. You don't have kids, you know? So more and more it's been normalized, and I've seen many graduate students have children during their PhD, even before being academics. I'm not sure if it's, for sure it has an impact, but I think people are more aware that they cannot just think about it as nothing happened and pretend that you can keep working. So I think people are slightly more reasonable. That said, I've had crazy things. Like I was invited at a seminar and I told them I couldn't go because it was the day, my due date. Due date means the day that I'm delivering. So I'm sorry, I cannot come because it's my due date. They know exactly what that meant. They were American, okay? And they are like, oh, it's great that you're taking things easy. And I'm like, yes. So easy. Like I'm not gonna go on a flight and come to Connecticut the day of my delivery, you know? So some people are insane and those are irredeemable. Like my Stanford colleague, he's insane and there's nothing that will save him from his insanity. So I think we need to be aware that just some guys, there's no way to change them. And sometimes women project a lot what they were expected to do back in the day. And back in the day, it must have been horrible. So some women still think that you should be going through the same kind of garbage that they went through. Yeah. The way I see it is that, yes, it might affect me, but I'm going to do whatever I want. That's the stage of my life I'm in. So like, when I accept, maybe I'll cut some losses, but the losses are worth it. So, yeah. Yeah.
Any more questions for Mark?
I think this question was really inspiring. I just got the feeling that in the US it seems to be this Ivy League schools that it's such a competitive environment to get into these big rooms. And now that you've come back to Spain to be close to family, do you see yourself going back there? Because I imagine it's like a very, how does this work? Just from curiosity. Are there like, I guess in many academic settings, there are like these big discussions with these big rooms. So if you take a break when you have a family, is it easy to come back? Is it hard? Like, how's it working? Do you have to kind of go to the next room?
I think it depends. So I lived in the US many years and I'm still a part-time professor there. So I have many connections. So me in particular, I don't see it as a break. I just see myself doing here something different. Actually, here I have an ERC consolidator. I feel I can do much more than there because here I'm a full-time researcher. So in many ways, I feel I can do more than there. It's true the environment there is unparalleled. So it's so motivating to be with people that work all the time, but on the other hand, they work all the time. So I think, you know, I don't see it as different. I think for hard sciences, it is quite different because for hard sciences, you might not have the machinery that you need. But for me as an economist, I have two pretty good servers to deal with big data. And with two pretty good servers, I'm done. I can be anywhere in the world and do the same level of research. But if I needed some accelerator or some fancy something, I don't know the names, but some of these big machines, then I would be in a much worse position coming back, and it would have been a much harder decision. But for economics, I feel like it's more of a less important decision. And yes, in my case in particular, I would expect to find a job back there if I wanted it. But in general, if you disappear for 3 years, it is kind of hard to come back. Actually, I was talking to some of the leadership in some of these institutions because they put a lot of effort in putting a daycare into big conferences and big meetings so that you show up with your 1-month-old because they put a daycare there. And I'm like, who wants to show up to, I don't know, Nebraska with a 1-month-old because you put a daycare there? So I was talking to them that the best thing would be to have a ready to come back program, that you disappear for 2 years and then you press the button and they're like, now I'm ready to come back. Not because you put a daycare and I can bring my 1 month old, but because I have a 2-year-old and now I can show up. And I told them, why don't we put a program that we encourage the organizers to give some access to women who are ready to come back. Oh, women will take advantage of this. And I'm like, seriously? Yeah, because they will strategize. And I'm like, no, our problem is that we're asked to do too much, not too little. So they were thinking that we would use this to do more. And I'm like, no, I want people to use this to do less so that you can disappear. But are they disappearing or are they just lacking? And I'm like, so I had to stop that conversation. I thought it was so reasonable. And to them, it would be just woman is lacking for 2 years and then pressing the button and taking it easy. And I'm like, got it. Will not try again. What I said about making your life easier. I tried, it didn't work. I'm not gonna try again. At some point, I'm like, well, there are these many battles I can fight, and I'm just not in the mood of hear nonsense 24/7. So I heard the nonsense once, and I'm not gonna try to hear the nonsense again. Maybe in 2 years I will try again, but not immediately, because honestly, it's so discouraging to see that you propose something absolutely reasonable, and they are already thinking about how women will take advantage of this. And I'm like, believe me, a woman that just gave birth and has a small baby will not take advantage of anything. You know, so it's crazy. Yes, sometimes it's crazy how they perceive us taking advantage. I even have been in many conversations for hiring where we have to help the white guys because they are having it so hard. Now that we are trying to have more women. So tough for them. And you are in these conversations and they are dead serious. They are looking at you and they are like, yeah, because white guys have it so hard. And you're like, yes, but they have potential. So it's crazy. Yes, I think economics is about the worst. Yes.